Can somebody educate me on why there's Black Americans that don't know where they're from, like their ethnicity and stuff? Like growing up Nigerian, having a grandfather in the house that's like straight from Nigeria, clothing, the food, the language, the accent, everything. I've always known since birth. I'm from California and I've recently moved to Atlanta, and it's clearly a cultural shock. But at the same time, I feel like it's very diverse here. But in the South, I feel like there's a lot of Black people that don't really know exactly where their ancestors are from. I guess that's what you would call it, their ethnicity. A lot of people just identify with the South. And that's where they're from. I don't really know how accurate that is. Especially with it being Black History Month, I feel like it should be more of an important thing for people to understand where they're from, because you're not just Black. I seen this creator on here talking about how the differences between ethnicity, nationality, and whatever, all those other things. And they were saying that African American is an ethnicity now because of the way that Black people got to America. It's an ethnicity. And I don't know how much I agree on that.
If anyone is out here saying Black Americans don't know their history, don't know who they are, you are uneducated. Go read a book. And two, you are a colonizer. Bye.
In the last few weeks, I made a video of Black Brits who were confused about Black Americans' identity. And now we're coming back with this Nigerian guy repeating the same patterns, saying the same thing. Black Americans don't know where they come from. And Black Americans didn't hesitate, they reacted to what he said. I want us to watch these reactions of Black Americans responding to what these guys were saying. We come back at the end and give you more insights, explaining to you guys what many immigrants don't understand.
America is not a white country. America has never been a white country. Just because you associate America with whiteness and prosperity does not mean that Black people and Native Americans are not from here. Black Americans are not immigrants and have never been immigrants. Black American, African American is our ethnicity because that ethnogenesis evolved here in the continental United States at the same time that all the other ethnicities developed in the Caribbean and Latin America. Are you with me? Does that make sense to you here? Okay, cool. Let's keep going. If you're Black from anywhere in the world, if you're from Africa, if you're from Europe, if you're from the Caribbean or Latin America, and you decide to move to America or talk about Black Americans online, do not make a video, do not write a post and press send, do not do anything before you educate yourself as to the people in the country you're talking about. And for those people who move here and have children who try to assimilate with whiteness and not educate your children and yourselves on Blackness, you end up with a child like this who sounds like a dunce. And then you say things like, well, I'm Nigerian because my grandparents in Nigeria, I know where I'm from, the walk, the talk, the food. Nigeria didn't exist when the transatlantic slave trade was happening. None of the countries in Africa existed. So what do you want me to claim? Where I'm from for the last 450 years. I never have to defend being Haitian. My cousins never have to defend being Bayesian or Dominican, but that Black American side, bro, it's like y'all won't let us live. It's all the same origin story. Different histories, same origin story, different boat stop. Why is that so hard for y'all to grasp and understand? I'm actually in 2026 tired of this conversation. 26, not to educate yourself as to the country you live in and the people you're talking about. And it's embarrassing for you all. It's embarrassing for you lot over there in the UK, for you in Africa. It's embarrassing because for you to talk about Black Americans in this way without having the knowledge to do so, all while saying that we're dumb, all while saying we have no culture, but you're wearing it, you're talking it, you're speaking it. It's about being Nigerian because your grandparents are from Nigeria. I am the descendant of people from Boulder, Alabama, and Millen, Georgia. The South in America is the source of Blackness for most of us, for the majority of us. The South is such a cultural phenomenon. And when you went to Atlanta, you felt some kind of way because you were around Black Americans. That is where most of our culture derives from. That is where most of our history, our music, our art, everything really derives from there. So if you're looking at even within our culture, there are different cultures within Black American culture. You know what's embarrassing? It's a shame that I know more about Nigeria than you know about America, and you grew up and live in America. Now, how does that make sense? And the fact that you can say Black Americans don't know where they come from during Black History Month without opening your phone, the world's encyclopedia, and just Googling our ethnicity. It's just lazy. It's intellectual lazy to keep saying this. Don't let the settler colony that you live in dictate how ignorant you are about the colonized people in that place. Just because Jamaica's an all-black place, Haiti's an all-black place, the Caribbean islands are mostly black, doesn't mean that they're not post-colonial countries, the same way we live in a post-colonial country. It's so sad that this conversation is still even happening, especially from someone who grew up in America, who's Nigerian. And it takes nothing to educate yourself. It takes nothing to not be ignorant. But please, I beg of you, do not come online again and talk about us at all. Happy Black History Month.
And then he went on to say, oh, we're not just from here. No, you're not from here. You're Nigerian. You think it's a flex. Oh, I grew up with my grandfather. Y'all really think we didn't know our grandparents? My great-grandmother raised me. She was born in 1935. I knew her mother. She was born in 1919. Some of y'all cannot trace back more than your grandparents. We actually have a longer paper trail than a lot of deeply melanin-rich people outside of the United States of America. We've been Black Americans longer than your grandfather been Nigerian, bruv. Nigeria was not established as a country until 1960. Let me run that back. Nigeria, if you can proudly say, I'm Nigerian, then what the hell? Our country is more than a century older than yours. We've been Black American people longer than your grandfather or you have been Nigerian. Now, if I get up here and say you don't know where you're from, but where's he from outside of Nigeria? No, but before Nigeria, what was it called? But where did y'all migrate from to get to Nigeria? Like, it sounds crazy to think of, right? Y'all think that y'all have like a monopoly on like this excess melanin, to whereas only people that come from the African countries have this color skin. And it's blasphemy. We were the first people on planet Earth. We inhabited the entire planet. It's this African superiority complex to sit up here and say, well, we don't come from here. No, you don't come from here. We've been American longer than you've been Nigerian. Y'all need to have some respect. And I think y'all don't understand what ethnicity is. Let me read the definition for y'all. Ethnicity refers to a shared cultural identity based on ancestry, language, religion, traditions, and history, rather than just physical traits, unlike race, often based on physical appearance, or nationality, based on citizenship. So nationality-wise, we're American. Race-wise, we're Black. Black American and African American is synonymous with what our ethnicity is. Based on citizenship, ethnicity is self-identified, subjective group affiliation that can change over time. So if people just only identifying with the South, that's because culturally and ethnically, they're Southern Black Americans. How you going to sit up here and say we don't know where we are? Then when we do our panels, which I'm about to go live soon, and we say, what's your ethnicity? Y'all act like it's offensive. And Deontay Gobbleneck, Kyle, said, oh, y'all acting like slave catchers, asking where's the freedom papers? These people have been literally, since they got here, forcing us to identify with them by way of saying we don't know where we come from and we have no culture, when literally they're walking around as physical embodiments of our culture. They absorb everything that we are. Every single fiber and essence of our being is absorbed by these people when they come over here. So to sit up here and say we don't know where we're from when our country is older than yours, a country that we built. And let's get into what constitutes as an ancestor, because I think y'all don't know what an ancestor is. Y'all keep thinking that we need to go back 5,000 blood clot years. Give me 1 second. An ancestor is any person from whom one is directly descended, typically in a vertical line of ascent. Parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, etc. They are defined by biological descent, bloodline, and genealogy, the paper trail that we always tell y'all about. Though adoptive parents are often considered social or milk line ancestors, they represent the previous generations from which a person inherits, distinguishing them from collateral relatives like aunts or cousins. A lot of us grew up with our ancestors. They've been doing this, they keep doing it, and being condescending and acting like they don't know
And we keep saying we're American. They cannot accept it. They don't do this to Brazilians that has a large Afro population. They don't do this to the Caribbeans. They ain't telling a Haitian, oh no, but where your family really from? I don't know why it's so hard for them to conceive of the fact that we are Americans. We're Black American. Some still go by African American. We are Negro. Whatever the fuck you want to call it, we're American.
What do they teach y'all about the Atlantic slave trade in the British school systems? Because I'm starting to believe that some of y'all just aren't bright. Like, y'all talk about American education, but clearly y'all are dense. Do you know how long slavery lasted here in the States? Are you aware of how far the states are compared to London? Are you aware of how long slavery lasted and how many generations that is? And the way that families were from the jump broken up and split away? That children were sold not with their parents, not with their grandparents, not with anybody else who probably had any type of familiar bond with them. They were taken away from their parents. They were given new names and everything. How can you find out where you're from if you've never been there because you were a child during the entire journey? Like, these are very, very common sense questions that if y'all weren't trying to be purposefully dense just to win a stupid ass argument, that you would be able to answer yourself. Like, I genuinely used to think that y'all probably had a better education system than we do over here. But clearly, the transatlantic slave trade was something that your white supremacists left out.
You African Americans believe that you are just American and you have no sort of...
To be Black and relatively conscious in America is to be in a constant state of rage almost all the time. As African Americans, our history has been ripped from us. So no, we can't tell you exactly where we are from. All we can say is my grandmother is from Georgia or my granddad is from Virginia. Here's one of my favorite children's books to read to my son. I suggest you start here. We are people that were born on the water. Go back and watch the video before it also, so y'all can see a perfect example of what racial gaslighting is. We are in an emotionally abusive relationship with America. They oftenly engage in gaslighting, which is a form of emotional abuse. When they try to tell you your experience or your ancestors' experience, it really wasn't what it was. It wasn't as bad. They try to warp your reality and make you think, hey, what we did, it wasn't even that bad. And it's really not a good feeling, especially when it's coming from diaspora, can I say this? The diaspora wars or somebody of African descent. It is really not a good feeling. That's why it's important to take time off of social media so you don't get caught up and overly expose yourself to the emotional abuse.
When some Black people come on my post and say that we are the original Americans and how Black Americans or most Black Americans don't have any ancestry from Africa, I always think to myself, you cannot assume that me and you are the same because we look alike. I can trace my ancestry back to Africa. Yours, you may say, can't be. That's your business. I want to be clear. I am an African American / Black American. My ancestors are from Africa. Yes, I do have some indigenous ancestry, but the overarching genetic composition is from Africa. I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's not appropriate for you to assume that I don't know where I come from. Why do it's not enlightening. It's not admirable nor endearing. It's highly inappropriate. Stop doing that. If you believe that you are an original American, that's fine. And if you want to share the knowledge on that and people finding that out, that's great. I'm not that though. And I respect, to the indigenous people of the Americas. I have some ancestry, but when I say African American, I mean that. African American. I love you, baby. Be well.
You might know geography, but you'll never know the origins of your slave ancestors. Pick a struggle, LOL. I almost hate to admit this, but of all the mean and nasty comments I've received on this app, this is probably one of the meanest and definitely the most hateful. And the crazy thing is, the words themselves aren't really that mean at all. But what I find most disturbing about this comment is knowing that this person wrote it with the sole intention of making me and millions of other black people in the Americas feel inferior. To use the brutal enslavement, mistreatment, and dehumanization of my ancestors as a gotcha moment is really not the serve you think it is, and it says a whole lot more about you than it says about me. I mean, regardless, I'm very proud to be a descendant of enslaved Africans in the Americas. And while I might not be able to pinpoint the exact country that they come from, it really doesn't matter that much to me anymore. Black people in the United States and in countries all over the Americas have created beautiful communities full of love, joy, and solidarity. And I know no matter where I go in the world, I will always find community with my other black brothers and sisters. So
I've been sitting here brainstorming why ethnicity steals curves on the streets. And I'm realizing that we conflate ethnic origins and DNA with ethnicity. And as a black American, I can't do that. I cannot synonymize my ethnicity and my ethnic origins because my ethnicity as a black American would cease to exist if it had to be proved by DNA. I'm not talking about race, I'm talking about ethnicity, which yes, often includes ethnic origins, background, etc., but it also includes shared customs, cultural traditions, norms, language. Black American ain't showing up on a DNA test for me. A lot of ethnicities ain't showing up on a DNA test for a lot of people, especially if you come from a colonized people or if your people were the colonizers. Got white European people in Latin America. Their DNA is showing up in the Iberian Peninsula. Okay, they're Spanish, Portuguese, but they're not saying their ethnicity is that. They're not saying they culturally are tied to them. They're saying they're Argentinian, Brazilian, Costa Rican. I could share similar DNA makeup to another black person in the Caribbean or a black person in West Africa. But my ethnicity is still black American. Their ethnicity in the Caribbean would still be Haitian, or their ethnicity over there would still be Nigerian. It explains why ethnicities can change within the same family, same ancestral line, down generations. Like my ancestors could have been Fula, Hausa, Wolof, but right now, I'm black American. We're the same race, same ethnic origins, but I'm black American now. And then it's like people can have multiple ethnicities. I'll think of my friends whose family immigrated here, maybe they're first, second generation American, and yet they have the culture of being Jamaican, Haitian, Trini, Nigerian, and they identify with that, but they also identify a bit with black American culture because that's the culture they're immersed in as well. No, it's like living in the Americas in this hemisphere and its specific connection to colonization, it makes us connect differently to our cultures out here. It's not just nationalities. Like, no, the ethnicities were formed over here because of colonization. Ethnic origins, they're there, right? Like, they matter, but you're not going to find my ethnicity, what I identify with, on a DNA test. You're not going to find it in an Ancestry test result.
Why do African Americans hate the idea of being African so much? I never really understood it. It's like they make it a point to prove that we are nothing like you. We look nothing like you. Y'all can never be us. Completely different. And it's funny because you are literally one of us, removed through slavery. That's it.
Every black American descendant of chattel slavery pre-1865 is the descendant of a biracial black American. That changes an ethnic group. It creates its own ethnic group. Why is it that Africans are specifically obsessed with making black Americans African and not other black people a part of the diaspora? Like Jamaicans, Caribbeans. And black Americans have literally the longest removal from the continent of Africa than any of the other members of the African diaspora. Black Americans, descendants of chattel slavery, are not just Africans that just stayed African, but just in a different country for 400 years. No, we are the product of 400 years of brutalization of our African foremothers and racial admixture, and we contain the DNA of various Europeans and the indigenous. And I don't know why you keep equating being African to having dark skin when there are other parts of the equation. Especially when you're looking at this through the lens of race, and race is a social concept based on shared culture, lineage, and historical contextualization, along with other cultural distinctions. 400 years of racial admixture, brutalization, and survival of a caste system in which we didn't even know how to speak the language, so we created our own. That's why you can tell the difference between a person, for instance, who is as dark as Wesley Snipes or as light as Rashida Jones and still recognize them clearly as Black American in a way that is very distinct or different from someone who may have more recent African ancestry. I really do think you all are like conflating Black Americans with, for instance, like Black Brits who are only like first or second generation removed from the continent of Africa. Africans are able to claim both their African Black identity and their very specific countries in which they come from. So Nigeria or, Cameroon, and, put their flags all in their... Black Americans have had everything stripped and stolen from us. And when we decide to choose the way in which we are referred or how we are to be perceived
after 400 years of things being stolen and for us to be considered property of another person, I'll be damned if I have an African, regardless of how resemblance we may be, tell me that you own how I decide to classify myself as. And I love my African family members. Like literally, my second cousins, our grandparents or brothers are half African and half Black American, and they know the distinction. We're all Black, but there are differences that just inherently separates us. Black Americans and Africans have different temperament styles. And if you continue to just look at our hair and our skin color and various other phenotypical presentation types, and you disregard other facets of racial admixture and genetic wiring and cultural standing, and because race A just is literally a social concept, we tend to be socialized and culturally appreciated or understood through the lens of the Negro, the American Negro, the Black American Negro. And every time you want to classify Black Americans, again, we are Black Americans, we're done with African American. And by referring to us as African American or saying that Black Americans don't want to identify with African or whatever, which we don't because we're not, you are contributing to the erasure of the trauma of slavery. That truly is the reason why we are who we are, why we have resiliency in ways that other Africans do not. The trauma of slavery affected our DNA. And yes, because our Black foremothers, who were widely the reason why we have our African DNA, contain the X chromosome. Your X chromosome determines your X traits, your physical presentation. And as you said in your video, there's such a diverse look in Nigeria, and most of our Black ancestors were originated from Nigeria. They were stolen from East and Central Africa. That, coupled with years of racial admixture with various white men from various parts of Europe and members of the American indigenous community, is going to create a very distinct look.
Shout out to all of these creators for giving us this necessary information. It's very needed for Africans and all immigrants in the USA to learn about the history of Black Americans. By talking about what is being spoken in the video, I want us to go back in the 1400s. The 1400s, that is when slavery started. That's when people from Africa started being exported to the Americas to work as slaves. And that time when the slavery was happening, there was nothing like the modern borders that divide African countries. So a person who was taken from Africa at that time, from the 1400s up to the 1800s, they didn't know whether they were being taken from Nigeria, from Ghana, from Central African Republic, from DRC. No, probably they were able to identify themselves by their tribes, but not the African countries as they are known in the modern days. Now, after arriving in the Americas, some of them were taken to the Caribbeans, others were taken to the USA, and they were stripped of, their names were changed, some of them were given brand new names, they were stripped of their identities, stripped of their African cultures that they had back in Africa. And at that time, there were many different tribes in Africa, many different kingdoms, but there were no African countries as they are known today. Fast forward to the 1884, that's when Berlin Conference happened. It happened in Europe, where these European countries came together and decided to draw borders in Africa. That's when they drew these modern borders that we see dividing African countries. At that time, these European countries started making these new African countries their colonies. They started colonizing African countries, acting as if they are going to save Africans from their wrongdoings. They started telling Africans that the kind of religion they were practicing were wrong. They started spreading Christianity, telling them that what Africans were doing were wrong, so they have to adopt to their new way of worships. That's when Christianity started being spread around Africa. And they started just showing Africans that white people are somehow superior to Black people. And since that time, Africans started developing this mindset that white people are superior beings to Black people, to the point that whoever in Africa who could see a white colored person, he could see him as a savior. And this mindset still exists today among many Africans on the continent. And that's why when you see these Africans migrating to America, to the USA, arriving in the USA with this mentality that white people are superior to black people. First of all, they find there these black Americans. And because they don't really know the history of black Americans and how they have arrived in America, they couldn't understand how these black Americans cannot identify themselves with any African country. But this ignorance makes them to think that black Americans don't know where they are from just because they can't identify themselves with any African country. And the funny thing is how I have also seen some people from the Caribbean telling black Americans that they don't know where they are from, forgetting that the Caribbeans have got the same history as black Americans. The way black Americans arrived in the USA is the same way people in Jamaica arrived there, most of them went there as slaves. But they feel like these Caribbeans, these Jamaicans can identify themselves as Jamaicans, but black Americans cannot identify themselves as Americans. This is very confusing. Now, I've been seeing many black Americans asking themselves, why do these black immigrants seem to be worshipping white people in the USA? The reason goes back to the way Africans see white people. Many of us see white people as our saviors. We see them as superior godly beings, if I can say it. They think that what white people can do cannot be done by black people. And that's why even these immigrants, when they are in America, they don't like to be friends with black Americans. They think that by trying to associate themselves with whiteness, they will be able to get more opportunities, they'll be able to learn a lot from these white Americans. They think that black Americans are not as smart as these white Americans. All of this goes back to what that Nigerian man was saying, that black Americans don't know where they are from. Black Americans know where they are from, but the problem is among these immigrants who haven't learned the history of black Americans, how they have arrived in America and how they've come to be black Americans, which is a specific ethnic group that is totally different from other black immigrants living in America. All of that is what I've got to say about the video of that Nigerian man. All I want you guys to tell me is what you think about these immigrants who often tend to tell black Americans that they don't know where they are from. What do you think about them? And if you really want to support me, please don't forget to like the video and drop your own opinions down there in the comment section. If you've not yet subscribed, please smash on the subscribe button.